down to the tabulation room, but I'll be back. No one will be in here until about 9:45, so. still have 15 minutes. It's hard to sit around and wait. Yes, that would be great, thank you. All set? All right, the timer is here, Lori, what you need? Oh, yeah, of course, sorry. So all is here, you know how the time counts down. Okay, we can begin.
Climate change. Some people believe that it is real, and some people don't. Some people see it as a problem, and some people just see it as an annoying news. Now, the question, based on recent actions, is economic and or political gain more important to government leaders than protecting the environment? And to this, I say no. My first point is that smaller country nations such as Tuvalu are fighting climate change, even though they are small and poor and don't have enough money to contribute. But they are still fighting climate change by making larger countries understand the threats that climate change can have to our environment. A quote from an article published by CNN on September the 10th called Rich Countries Aren't Stopping Climate Change. Can poor nations save themselves? A quote states at a meeting of Pacific leaders last month in the tiny island of Tuvalu, other attenders said was overcome with emotion as he tried to secure Australia Prime Minister Scott Morrison's support for a more forceful approach to tackling the climate change crisis. With this, we can see that these smaller countries have more awareness to what is going on and helping these bigger countries, these bigger superpowers, to realize that this is a real threat. Now, my second point is Young Scottish girl Greta Thunberg had recently started a campaign for climate change. Currently, she went to a UN summit to give her view, and many people listened to Greta. From one side to the other side of the world was listening. The people were listening. And what makes up a country are the people. And for the government, and the government is bound to listen to the people of its own country. These people also are aware of what Greta is talking about. She talks about the consequences of climate change. She talks about how us as youngsters should stand up and have a fight against climate change. A quote by The Economist, published by The Economist on September 26th, the article named Day After Tomorrow, the world is still struggling to implement meaningful climate policies. A quote states, "How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and the solutions needed are still nowhere in sight." She will have seen or heard little at the UN's one-day climate summit, or in the wide range of get-together surroundings in which made up New York's Climate Week to placate her wrath. This shows that people are actually listening to what she has to say. People are taking her point and actually thinking about it. What if climate change could destroy us all? What if it is a big problem? And this is what leads many countries to be a part of this, be part of climate change and have an action against it. My third and final point is what are major countries doing? Now we've talked about these small countries, but how many major countries actually believe that climate change is a problem? How many major countries are actually willing to take out their time, spend more time on this topic of climate change instead of looking after their politics and economy? I say that there are a lot out there, a lot of countries out there that believe climate change is a problem. Although there are some that do not, there are many that do. An article published by The Economist on October 17th called Right Way to Measure Carbon Emissions. A quote states, the majority of the signatories are European countries, small islands, island states, or rich cities or regions. This shows that these big countries have signed a waiver in order for the fact that they will do something against climate change. But there is one big superpower that does not believe this, and that is the U.S. President Donald Trump. We've all heard his famous speech that I don't believe that climate change is real. That is his belief. Now, no one can change his belief. But I think that it is stupid that he is working off his belief and not facts. He is working off what he wants to know, what he wants to believe, and what he wants to see. And to this, I say that he is wrong. He, being the president of one of the biggest superpowers, should do something. Therefore, I believe that people focus more in protecting the environment than their own political or economic gain.
You can, if I know it's not really a job, but if you want to open the door and tell the next person to come in, that would be great. Nick? And everyone knows to not come in until we get them, right? That would be good.
I don't think so.
That would be good, just because like
Yeah. Sorry.
the timing is not always 100%
Yeah.
exact. Yeah. You were okay that it happened.
Oh yeah. It's happened before.
Okay, it didn't like knock you off the charts or anything. Okay. Thanks a lot. Wait until I start speaking now.
According to an article published by the BBC on November 1st, over 5 million masks were distributed at schools in Delhi, and schools were closed on certain days as India declared a public health emergency due to the pollution in the air. When we think back to the Amazon forest, the lungs of the earth, in flames for days on end a couple months ago, questions are raised on government priorities. We may ask, based on recent actions, is economic and political gain more important to government leaders than protecting the environment? The answer to this question, unfortunately, would have to be yes. This has been shown to be the case, as one, political egos have gotten in the way of environmental protection, and the economy is placed higher on the list of government priorities, causing environmental rules to be rolled back instead of being made stricter. So, firstly, according to Foreign Policy, an article written on or published on October 28th, egos got in the way of aid. This is when it comes to the Amazon wildfires back in August. The Brazilian president, Bolsonaro, did not accept $22 million in aid and said he would not accept them until Macron, the French president, apologized for accusing him of lying about climate change, climate control commitments. So, because Macron made a statement saying that he was not fulfilling his promises and therefore lying about his intentions to protect the environment, he decided not to accept aid to protect the environment because of this. So this clearly shows how political image and strength is being placed higher on the priority list than protecting the environment. Secondly, the economy is also being placed as a higher priority. The Amazon fires were actually approved by the Brazilian government. According to Foreign Policy, it was lit by farmers with explicit approval from the government. This shows that the farming sector was placed at a higher priority than the environmental, than protecting the environment, because the government actually approved these fires to occur so that the farmers would have more land, more fertile land, to create more crops. Thirdly, environmental rules are actually being rolled back for economic gain instead of being made stricter in order to protect the economy. According to an article published on the New York Times on October 3rd, a total of 85 rollbacks have been attempted by Donald Trump, rollbacks when it comes to environmental protection. So examples of this include rules on air pollution and emissions being lifted and more being in the process of being lifted, rules on drilling and extraction also being lifted, and rules on infrastructure. Lifting these rules are all things that can ultimately help the United States economy. So this shows how the economy is being put much higher on President Donald Trump's list than than environmental protection. Examples of specific rollbacks that have occurred is a Clinton era limit on toxic emissions, so this dates quite far back, being lifted. So toxic emissions are now way less strict, meaning more toxic emissions can be made by companies, damaging the environment. And there is now no need to report on methane emissions. This was a rule that was also rolled back, so companies had to report, drilling companies had to report how much methane they released into the environment yearly, but now they don't have to do this anymore, which means if they don't have to do this and there are not rules on the limits, then they can produce much more methane, damaging the environment, but possibly helping the economy. So to summarize, recent events have shown that the environment is at a critical stage. And this raises the question on government priorities and its economic or political gain, or both, more important to government leaders than protecting the environment. To which the answer is yes, because one, political egos in the past have gotten in the way of environmental protection. Two, the economy, on top of politics, has also been placed above. And examples of this are specific rollbacks from Donald Trump and the United States government when it comes to protecting the environment. Thank you.
Okay, Nick, if you wanna just stick around there and get the next person in, that's great. May I begin just like let the answer go across in front of you? And I'll the timer get ready. Okay.
Can the United Nations effectively lead global efforts to contain climate change and limit fossil fuel consumption? Let me tell you a story about a 10-year-old living in the United States of America in 2016. One day he was scrolling through his iPad and saw an article from a not very credible source saying that the world was going to end in 2016. He was scared. He was very scared. Sometimes he even cried. And the relief that he felt on January 1st, 2017 was a great feeling. I know that because I'm that person. I did believe that the world was going to end in 2016. And I do believe that the world is going to end soon because of climate change. As governments, with all due respect, are not taking enough action that needs to be taken, which leads the United Nations to step up and kind of be a leader and guide the countries into taking the right steps for climate change. But I don't believe that the UN will single-handedly be able to hold off climate change because there are protests interfering with the actions. High authority leaders don't believe in climate change, and oil and gas businesses want their money. First of all, the protests are interfering with UN taking action. According to the October 30th BBC article, Chile cancels climate and APEC summits amid mass protests. The Chile government won't host the UN summit because they are focusing on re-establishing social order. Now, note that a lot of these protests come from young people. As you probably know, there's a girl named Greta Thunberg. She's from Sweden, and she did talk at a UN summit. A lot of young people are blaming these climate change problems on other generations. Even at a New Zealand parliament, a young girl said, "Okay, boomer," in a formal press conference about climate change. So the protests are coming from young people. And it shows how these protesters, these people, are interfering with the UN making progress, as they could have had a summit that day that could have led to many conclusions and many pledges that could have possibly brought us one step closer to saving the world. My second point is that people with high authority don't believe in climate change. According to the same article, Mr. Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, dropped out after being the original hosts of the climate conference Brazil was supposed to hold due to budget restrictions. However, that may just be a cover-up because a foreign minister was appointed by Mr. Bolsonaro, and the same foreign minister said that climate alarmism was a plot by the Marxists. Climate is very important and is a big problem in the world. So while hiring the foreign minister, Mr. Bolsonaro might have taken his opinions into consideration. So maybe, just maybe, Mr. Bolsonaro does not believe in climate change. Another leader who does not believe in climate change is Mr. Donald Trump. He believes that climate change is a hoax. This might affect the UN and their actions and trials to save climate change, because the highest leaders in the world do not believe in the same issue that they are trying to solve. My third and final point is that oil and gas businesses such as ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, and British Petroleum want to make their money. This is the business that they're in, and they don't want to lose their money. So the bosses of the companies that I just mentioned, ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, BP bosses, had a forum by the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, and they are unlikely to stop unless demand for their products drops massively. I don't believe the UN can. In conclusion, I don't believe that the UN can lead us all, as I believe that climate change is inevitable. I believe that if we really, really want to stop climate change, it has to be a collective effort. The UN can't do anything. The political leaders from their respective countries need to act up. And also, we need to act up. We might just be normal humans trying to live their lives, and we might just think, hey, we don't matter. But every drop counts in the ocean. We need to put money and greed aside in order to stop climate change. Thank you.
Alright, yeah.
Miss, may I use the bathroom?
Like, are you dying? Like, you just, like, would be able to manage 5 more minutes?
No, I could.
Okay, then let's keep it, like, yeah, okay, you've been good. Yeah, can you get the last person? Just so it's fair and it seems like everyone's following the same thing.
The President of the United States, the leader of the world's largest leading Western nation, has stated multiple times that climate change and global warming are not real. The United States, China, and India are 3 of the world's largest carbon emission emitters, and none of those countries have produced any efforts to slow the pace of climate change or decrease their emissions of carbon. Every summer in the United States, the world has seen hurricanes that have hit certain states and have left the states in damage that is almost unrepairable. This is all due to rising sea levels, yet the President of the United States has persisted multiple times that climate change is a hoax. This all leads to the question, based on recent actions, is economic or political gain more important to government leaders than protecting the environment? In which my answer is yes, due to the reasons that President Trump has eliminated federal regulations on environment and has instead started conflicts with other nations around the world. And secondly, the countries who play the biggest roles in climate change are uncooperative. Firstly, President Trump's elimination of federal regulations on environment. In the New York Times article published on September 25th, it stated that more than 60 countries have said to try and reduce their carbon emissions. However, these 60 countries only account for 11% of global carbon emissions, whereas countries such as the US account for more than all 60 of those countries combined. Furthermore, President Trump has rolled back on 85 of environmental rules in the US. He has canceled requirements for oil and gas companies to report methane emissions, repealed Obama's rule on limiting methane emissions on public land, and stopped enforcing a rule that prohibited the use of hydrofluorocarbons, which is a powerful and deadly greenhouse gas. While Trump has been destroying the environment of the US, he has engaged in political operations that have worsened his relations with nations such as Turkey, Yemen, and China. Trump has also lifted the ban on the use of E15, a gasoline blend made of 15% ethanol, which burns gasoline with a higher concentration, therefore worsening air quality in the United States. And this is all according to a BBC article published on November 1st. Furthermore, the US government has only managed to stop Trump from rolling back on only 10 environmental laws. Secondly, the countries who played the biggest role in climate change are uncooperative in mending the implications of climate change. In New Delhi, the air quality has gotten so bad to the point where the Supreme Court of India ordered masks to be distributed to students in schools. But how does distributing masks relieve the implications of climate change? In a foreign policy article published on September 23rd, it stated that the UN has been warning nations against climate change and has specifically warned India against climate change. But a simple warning will never make the Indian government implement environmental regulations. In the meantime, India has been preoccupied with the possibility of starting a nuclear war with Pakistan, rather than focusing on the health of their own people. In conclusion, the question was, based on recent actions, is economic or political gain more important to government leaders than protecting the environment? And which my answer was yes, due to the reasons that President Trump has repealed environmental laws and has instead focused on starting conflicts with other nations, and to the reasons that the countries who play the biggest role in climate change are uncooperative with mending the implications of climate change.
Okay, the time? 4:26. Okay, that's the end.
No, that's
Well,
not.
there's-
Oh,
Solid.
wait. I don't have someone on my
Alpha.
paper.
We can watch.
Wait. I only have 4 people on my.
No, Salad's also there.
But he's not on here. Is there another room for Extemp?
No, yeah, but that's
But
a 5.
it's 5-5, it's always been 5-5. Must be
I
some,
need another grade.
No.
it must be another, it must be some, like.
Okay. Fine. I'm sorry about that. Sorry.
May I get this check?
Yeah, of course. I'll just double check, for the tab room. So we got that. So, Will, do you know your participant number?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay. Your O something, I'll look it up later. Okay, let's finish the round, okay? Are you ready? All right, and if we have everyone quiet, then afterwards you can debrief. I know it's hard to like get all that stress out, you wanna get that. Okay, so Will, take it away.
If a frog jumped into a vat of boiling hot water, it would jump out immediately. But it was placed in a cool vat of water and the heat was slowly turned up, it would wait until its skin burned off. This is an analogy used by Al Gore in his famous documentary about climate change, An Inconvenient Truth. A documentary that I saw a few years ago and it still stuck with me. It's analogous to human beings' reaction to climate change and our willingness to procrastinate on what needs to be done. Radical changes to avoid an existential threat to humanity. The question before us today is, can the UN effectively lead global efforts to contain climate change and limit fossil fuel consumption? At the current rate, I would say no to that answer for 3 reasons. Firstly, because the data regarding climate change and the predictions and projections that scientists have are insufficient for us to productively counteract the effects of climate change. Secondly, because the UN lacks the mandate to enforce the necessary reforms that would limit climate change. And third, because there is simply a lack of technology for poorer nations to industrialize and grow their energy consumption without also using fossil fuels and only clean energy. Starting with my first point, according to The Economist in a September 26 article, the world is still struggling to implement meaningful climate policy. Even if all pledges under the Paris Climate Accords are acted on, the gap between what is promised and what needs to be done remains chasm. This shows us that pledges made years ago may not be insufficient given the data that we have now. According to an article by CNN published September 25th, a landmark UN report warns us sea levels will rise faster than projected by 2100, with the conclusion that the world may only have until 2030 to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Due to the complicated nature of climate science and atmospheric sciences, our predictions constantly change, and the pledges we made years ago may be insufficient to counteract climate change effectively, and thus the UN does not have the power to keep up with the emerging science. For my second point, according to the Washington Post in an article published October 10th, the world needs a massive carbon tax in just 10 years to limit climate change, the IMF says. Continuing, if you compare the average level of the carbon tax today, which is $2 a ton, to where we need it to be, it's a quantum leap, saying Paulo Moro, Deputy Director of the Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF. A carbon tax to increase the cost of carbon emissions is necessary, but it requires a global effort to increase the cost of carbon. This cannot be done by any single country alone, and the UN simply does not have the mandate to pass the necessary legislation and tax reform across the world. A limiting factor to what the UN can achieve, thus outside of the capability of the UN to fight climate change. According to another article dated October 17 by The Economist, at least 60 countries and over 100 major cities have promised to get to net zero carbon emissions. The trouble is that few account fully for the emissions created by products that are consumed within their borders but produced outside them, leading to massively inaccurate reporting. The UN again does not have the mandate to enforce the correct reporting mechanisms in these countries. They simply have bad data. This again shows the problem of the United Nations. It does not have the jurisdiction to operate within these nations, and a global effort is required to fight climate change. No single country can do it alone. As to my third point, according to Foreign Policy, in an article dated September 6th, we need a rapid transition to renewables, yes, but scientists warn that we can't keep growing energy use at existing rates. No energy is innocent. The only true clean energy is less energy. The problem is poorer countries still need to meet their requirements for growing energy use in order to meet basic needs. This shows us a fundamental problem with developing countries such as India and China. They simply lack the political will to stop industrialization in order to lower carbon emissions. And with countries such as the United States pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, we do not see willingness on the part of larger, already more developed countries to cut back on carbon emissions. This again shows us an inherent problem with the United Nations. It cannot enforce countries who are richer, more industrialized to limit their carbon emissions so that the poorer may catch up. This is an inherent problem with our current technology, and even with the growth of clean energy. It seems unfeasible for any organization, including the United Nations, to enforce what needs to be done. Not to leave you off on a sour note, but something more hopeful, we see change in the young generation. With Greta Thunberg, the Swedish climate activist addressing United Nations, there is still hope for progress, hope for change. Radical reforms do need to be enacted. And we cannot be like the frog that is waiting for its skin to boil in that vat of boiling water. We must act now. We must act as if there is an impending climate crisis tomorrow, not 100 years from now, because that's what it will take for us to resolve the issue. Inevitably, climate change is going to come for us. It's an existential threat to humanity. But unless radical change is taken now, there will be no hope. We cannot procrastinate and hope that the United Nations or any other organization will take care of this on its own. It requires, apart from all of us, a duty to cut down on carbon emissions and contribute in whatever little way we can. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
That's the end. Now we're gonna find out who makes finals. Finally. All right. Thanks, guys. Well done.
Hello.